Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
Intelligence, voice recognition,
machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Hey, Brett.
What's up, Nick?
Want to play a little game to start off this week's episode of the Artificial Podcast?
Is this our Saw edition?
I see what you did there. I see what you
See what I
did
did
there.
there?
But no,
Okay, right.
I have a different game in mind.
Okay.
The game is called True or Misinformation.
So like truth or dare, but dare is misinformation.
Sure.
Okay.
You can go
All
with
right.
that.
All right. Lay it
So
on
I'm
me.
gonna
Let's do it.
I'm going to show you two different headlines, and I want you to tell me if it's true or misinformation.
Ooh, this is gonna be fun. Okay, I like this. All right.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let me pull up your screen here.
Pull up my screen.
Are you gonna switch the screen?
Yeah, I was going to screen share.
Yeah, go for it.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
First headline: Americans scrambling for COVID vaccine after CDC director announces thousands of doses buried somewhere in California. True or misinformation?
That's totally misinformation.
Is it, Brett?
It is, yes.
Is it?
Is that your final answer? You gotta say that. Please say that.
Why do you say it's misinformation?
You have to say, is that your final answer? Like it's a millionaire.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Why is it misinformation, do you think, Brett?
Thousands of doses buried somewhere in California. I probably would have heard that on mainstream media. I didn't hear it anywhere else, so this is probably misinformation.
Well, I'll have you know, you're 110% right. This here is misinformation. This is not a real headline, but to some people, this may be a real headline.
Yeah.
I have one more for you. Are you ready?
Ready.
Second headline: I want to go see those mountains where it looks like Avatar, says Biden in speech outlining foreign policy agenda. True or misinformation?
Can you scroll down a little bit? Keep scrolling down.
You're supposed to go off of the headline.
That's the Onion, Nick.
You ruined my whole bit.
If you're gonna do like truth or misinformation, don't put the onion.com. I know what the Onion is.
The point... You ruined the whole thing.
Oh, I'm sorry, misinformation then.
I hope you're happy with yourself.
Jesus Christ. It's like, is this article from the Sunday morning cartoons misinformation or truth, Brett?
You know what? We're gonna do rewind. Are you ready?
Rewind?
Rewind. Let's flash back.
All right.
Now, Brett, the second headline,
Huh?
is it true or misinformation?
Judging by the fact that there's nothing on this page that would lead me to believe what this could be, I'm going to go with my gut. I think it's misinformation.
Is that your final answer?
That's my final answer.
Well, Brett, you won the grand prize of a big old sack of nothing because you are 110%
Wow!
right.
I never win anything. This is
This
great.
headline is misinformation. Now, again, to some people, though, they may interpret this as fact. Now, the reason why I wanted to lead into this is because, of course, the topic of what we are going to be talking about today is big tech, misinformation, and free speech. Very timely, I think, for us to talk about this on the Artificial Podcast, and for a variety of different reasons. But as you already pointed out, of course, Brett, these articles that I showed here are indeed from The Onion, which, of course, is known for being a satirical publication.
So the first one was also?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Okay.
But the reason I chose The Onion and did that is because those familiar with The Onion know it is satire. But there's a lot of people out there who may view what The Onion wrote as fact, which could qualify as misinformation.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen people, over the past year specifically, share Onion articles and claiming them to be true. And I think you have seen this as well.
I have seen that. Yeah, I've seen a couple people be like, what is going on here? And I'd be like, that's The Onion. It's like satire.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to lean with that. But anyhow, welcome everybody to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. Nick Myers here, and I'm excited to welcome the one, the only, the CTO who knows it all, Mr. Brett Brooks.
Oh, stop. Stop it.
People are probably wondering how you and I are doing a lot more episodes.
Because we suck at finding guests.
Brett's not wrong. at least right now we suck at finding guests. Well, I suck at finding
To the
guests.
listeners, do you think I want to be doing this? No. I'm just kidding.
Well, I thought you do.
I'm just kidding.
It was your idea months ago. Nick, why don't we do more
See,
episodes?
this is
with
why I
the
don't
both of
joke
us?
around. This is why I don't joke with you.
What?
Because you get serious. I'm totally
I'm just
kidding.
saying. It was your idea.
Months ago.
You did. I want to do more episodes with you, Nick. And here we are doing more episodes. So you
Yep.
shut your mouth and you have fun.
Okay.
Anyhow, I've been looking forward to talking about this for a while, and we may be blurring the lines of does this actually qualify as a discussion related to technology, but I think it does because it involves social media, it involves information or the history of information, it involves the big tech companies, and of course this whole argument right now of what qualifies as free speech and what social media has to do with that, and all of this stuff is just so front and center. So I feel like it's only what word am I looking for? It's only appropriate that we talk about this.
Sounds good.
Oh, that's all you have to say.
So it looks like let's go over the brief history of information. How about?
Okay, Brett. Well,
I like how you say. Do you have anything to say to that? When there's nothing to really say, I have nothing to say.
Fine. Well, so everybody who's listening knows how we're going to go through this. We'll start by breaking down what exactly. Well, we're not going to define information because that's not the purpose of this episode, but we're going to go through a brief history of information just to lay some contextual groundwork. And then go into the rise of the internet, big tech, and social media. Then we'll talk a bit about how, yes, there is a pandemic going on right now, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's been an even bigger pandemic going on for far longer, and that, my dear listener, is a pandemic of misinformation.
Ooh, I like your play on words, Nick. That was clever.
Yes. And then finally we'll wrap up with what's the deal with free speech. So, what do you say, Brett? Shall we start this puppy up?
I'm excited to learn about the history of information.
Well, let's jump into it. So,
All right.
I think it's only appropriate before we start talking about misinformation in general that we kind of take a step back and look at our thousands upon thousands of years of human history and how human beings have, well, maybe not defined information, but how we have communicated information with one another, because that's what this discussion really is, right? We've just been developing different tools and mechanisms to share information with one another, more efficiently, easier, whatever you have it.
Correct.
Well, of course we know for thousands of years, human beings have continuously been improving how we share information, thoughts, and ideas. And throughout our history, I view information as evolving in a reverse funnel. So you know how a funnel is like this?
Yep.
Well, I view information as evolving like this, where it's a reverse funnel. Like when I do it with my hands here.
Yeah, you switch
Funnel.
it from a funnel to a reversed one. It's kind of like a V to an A,
Yep.
that.
I did do that. So
Yeah,
I view it.
like a bucket to a tent. Like.
Oh my god. Anyhow, I have viewed it as a reverse funnel because information throughout our history has been incredibly narrow and in the hands of the few, of course, for thousands of years. And as we've developed new tools to spread that information more efficiently, it's become more widely available. So, my reverse funnel concept, I should trademark that. Copyright.
No, don't. There's no point.
So let's take a hop in the DeLorean and go all the way back to early man. So, of course, one of the primary ways that we've communicated information and thoughts and ideas to one another is, of course, verbal communication, our ability to speak, which is still something completely unique to humans. And, of course, we developed the ability to speak about 300,000 years ago. And this led to the art of storytelling, where information was passed to people through story. And as we were engaging in this art of storytelling, information was still siloed to only small groups of people and was transformed constantly over time because of the game of telephone, which was still applicable even to back then. But storytelling was still a core part of that. And because of that, we're biologically hardwired to understand information communicated through story more than any other type of communication.
They probably use the grunting back then.
Well, whatever, you know.
And I still use that today after I bar hop with you guys.
That's funny. That is funny. Brett does do that. Brett does do that. But most of the information that we shared with one another was done through story. And then, of course, as we evolved, we just started doing that through cave art and cave paintings, which we started doing about 40,000 to 14,000 years ago. So, that's early, man. What about ancient civilization? Well, of course, we know ancient civilizations used pictographic writing or hieroglyphics, which originated shortly before 3100 BCE. For those, BCE stands for before Common Era. Yes, before Common Era. And then after hieroglyphics... I
thought it was before Christ entered.
It was
I'm
changed
just kidding.
to be a more scientific abbreviation.
I'm just kidding.
So after pictographic writing and hieroglyphics, we then started actually developing written communication in the form of cuneiform script, which was used in ancient Mesopotamia around 3200 BCE. And once we did that, we started writing everything down, right? Thus, the Great Library of Alexandria that housed between 40,000 to 400,000 scrolls during its height, which was the equivalent of about 100,000 books, which back then was a lot of information.
Can you imagine like how advanced our civilization would be if that didn't burn down? Like there's probably a lot of stuff in there that we could use.
So here's what's interesting about this. So I, after doing some research, because preparing for this, a lot of people think it was burnt to the ground, but actually, it not necessarily. More than anything, it just started losing its influence, and as the Roman Empire took over, they didn't care as much and didn't put a lot of effort into it, and librarians started leaving, so it just kind of crumbled. And then they got into conflicts, and the thing just went away naturally.
Okay, so you're saying I'm the victim of misinformation?
Well, this is another interpretation of what could have happened. It did catch fire, but it didn't burn the whole thing to the ground that a lot of people say it did.
Okay.
According to what I researched.
So we don't really know.
We just know that it stopped existing after a period of time.
I've always thought that. It's like sometimes I forget what I had for breakfast yesterday morning, so it's like, how do we know what really happened 400 years ago, 600 years ago? How do we know what happened 20 years ago?
But of course it was, during the Great Library of Alexandria that story and writing, scrolls and books, became the primary forms of information dissemination until the invention of the printing press in the mid-1400s. So we were writing on scrolls and parchment for a very long time before we started communicating through the printing press, which again was an incredible innovation in the scope of how we communicate information. So then that leads us into the printing press and newspapers, where in 1450, Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press with metal movable type. And then in 1844, Charles Fennerty produces paper from wood pulp. So now we're not using parchment anymore. We're actually using paper as we know it today. And then in 1849, the Associated Press organizes the Nova Scotia Pony Express to carry the latest European news for New York newspapers in the United States.
Nice.
So now we're fully into using newspapers as a primary way to disseminate information, which means we're able to communicate with a lot more people, and now you have the concept of the free press coming into existence. Now, when we look at, colonial United States, newspapers were actually delivered up to 100 miles for a penny, and beyond 100 miles for 1.5 cents.
For a penny?
Yeah.
That's insane.
You got to think a penny was worth
$1.
A lot more back then. And the first major newspapers in the United States were the New England Courant, which was actually one of the first, and the Virginia Gazette. And, of course, newspaper became a primary way that people got their information up until the radio, and then beyond that, the television. So, of course, as we enter the 20th century, we see the rise of the radio, which of course the radio had been around since the 1800s, but not used widely to actually share information with people up
Yeah.
until the first radio broadcast in 1920 from radio station KDKA based in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's funny how people used to listen to the radio just like how we watch TV,
Right, and then of
My
course
grandma used to do that.
And of course, after the radio, through the 20s, the 30s, and even the early 40s, we got into television, where Lowell Thomas hosted the first ever regularly scheduled news broadcast on television in 1940. I actually did not know that TV was even possible in 1940, but it was, apparently.
I guess where we think more of like when it was publicly available, when people started getting it in their homes.
Which was the 50s, mainly.
Yeah, so.
And I would even argue probably late 50s, early 60s more than anything.
So I wonder what they did before that, where TV's just available in like specific public places, and then it went to their homes.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure the military was using them because they get everything first, and I'm sure they were used in more commercial applications. But yeah. So of course, after 1940 and up through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s for the most part, newspaper, radio, and television were the primary ways that we communicated information to one another around the world. And then everything changes in 1989 when the World Wide Web was created by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. And that opened Pandora's box, because between 1990 to 2000, hundreds of thousands of independent blogs and online publications are created. Just in that 10-year span.
Like the whole world changes when the World Wide Web comes about.
And then, if that wasn't life-altering enough, of course we have the launch of the iPhone in 2007, which forever changed the way people access information on the internet. Having the internet in the palm of their hand 24/7. And then again, we let out more of Pandora's box, and Facebook launches in 2004, and Twitter launches in 2006, and the rest is history.
That's just...
Now the entire world can share information within seconds with every other person on the planet.
When you go over the whole history of it all, it's kind of like we really just shoved like thousands of years into a decade of change,
Yeah. Yep. Because if you look at the time period, even between early writing and television, radio, I guess even newspapers, it was a very long time.
No, like just 300,000 years ago from creating speech to the printing press and all that.
About that, yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like from the printing press till now, that's like 500 years of change. Even more than that, just squeezed and condensed and compressed into like a decade.
Right.
And we're all just being like, this is normal.
Yep.
How humans interact with this technology is fine. Nothing, nothing mentally, wrong is happening with us.
Well, and that's why I often talk about that event horizon that we approach with the internet, because it morphed into an unstoppable force that nobody was prepared for.
Yeah.
And I think we still aren't prepared for it. We still are trying to figure this out, and maybe never will figure it out.
See all the studies coming out with these depressed people, all these kids that are depressed and stuff, and have to like try and live up to these other kids on Instagram and stuff and social media.
I actually just watched a documentary last night on HBO Max, and it was talking about the whole fake influencer thing. How a lot of these I hate that word so much.
Influencers,
all these influencers that people follow are just, it's all fake.
Yeah, there's like a common trend right now on social media where kids, like Gen Z, is looking back at high school reunions and stuff, and high school kids who were videotaping back then, and they are just, a lot of the comments are saying, I wish we didn't have social media. Because they look happier. Those kids look happier.
I'm honestly getting to the point, I wish we didn't have social media. Mm-hmm. And the thing, we will talk about this later, because I view it as a duality. There's a problem with the tool itself, and there's a problem with the people using the tool.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that later. But anyhow, so that's setting the stage for how we've shared information over our history, which I thought was pretty fascinating. But now it gives context to where we're headed with this whole discussion on misinformation.
Yep.
So, with all that being said, let's look at the rise of the internet, big tech, and social media. This is where everything, of course, changes within the last 20 years, for the most part. So, of course, with the introduction of the internet for the first time, every human being could connect with one another no matter you were in the world, which is a very good thing, but also a very bad thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to preface this by saying we're going to be talking about mostly the bad, but there is good, because you look at different pieces of world history that have happened in the last 20 years. Take the Arab Spring, for example. That movement would not have started in the late 2000s had people not had access to social media. They were able to organize and actually create that movement because of social media. It was a very good movement. But of course, we've also seen a lot of the negative side of that coin in just the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And I really think it's starting to pull away from good intentions and good uses to very bad ones. We're really reaching that point. But, of course, information that was once siloed to only newspapers and large television and radio networks, with the internet now became 100% democratized. Anybody could share anything they wanted within seconds.
It's good that not a lot of people can share their opinions and thoughts. You know, we shouldn't really have that.
There's a duality to that, though, right? Because historically, you could only get your information... Again, it's that reverse funnel concept, right?
Yeah.
Where you could only get your information from a few sources, so you had to put your trust in those sources.
It's like it's bad to get your sources from just one source, but it's also bad to get your sources from literally everybody on the planet.
Correct. Well, you think of, like, the monarchies of old, right? Like the Roman Empire. All the information came from Julius Caesar and the elites. And that's all you had to go off of, because most of the people, which a majority of the people were peasants and poor, couldn't question or think about anything because they could only go off of the information they were presented, which came down from the leadership. So it was bad in that sense, of course. And then, of course, we look at the internet and how it democratized that as a very good thing, because we can perform our own research now and think differently about things and get contradicting opinions and question. But unfortunately, it's starting to become very siloed again, which is, I think, what scares me, because you look at the fact that all of this could be democratized for a very good purpose, and we're still siloing ourselves, and information is only trickling through very narrow channels when it shouldn't be. Yeah. So there's the duality of it, you know.
Okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
And it all comes back to this, you know, well, I guess it doesn't all come back to this quote, but I love this quote, and this quote was actually used in that documentary, The Social Dilemma, that we watched a couple months ago.
Oh, yeah, The Social Dilemma.
And I think this quote from Sophocles it's perfect.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Nothing vast enters the life of mortals without a curse.
Yep, it's like the monkey's paw.
And by God, is the internet vast. And really, all the technology we've created in the last 30 years is vast when you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a curse that comes with that, right? And I think we all are starting to experience, again, the opposite side of the coin right now.
I was so excited when social media first came about. I'm like, oh my God, I can send you notifications to help me out with my farm and stuff, and take this little survey to help my personality. Like, what kind of Care Bear am I? But now it's just turned into like, my life's better than yours on everybody's page, and it's really not. It's pretty much just fake everywhere.
In a weird way, don't you really miss the nonstop Farmville requests? Because at least then Facebook was still benign.
I'll help you water your strawberries.
Yeah, at least then Facebook was still relatively benign and innocent, and now that's just not the case.
Yeah. Now it's just like, really, it's got even worse. Like, I'd rather have 2015 social media than 2021 social media. It's got even worse.
Well, we'll talk about why this is the case, but...
Well, yeah, I think we all know why, but I'm not going to talk about it.
To put this into some context, you know, in 2021, there were more than 7.1 billion websites and more than 500 million blogs. And this all happened over the course of 20 years, which is an incredibly short period of time. When you look at the entire scope of human history, This is an incredibly short period of time, to the point you brought up earlier, where so much has happened within a short period of time, where before it would take hundreds of years to progress to the next form of how we choose to share information. This all happened incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, it's not a good thing.
It's not.
I mean,
no.
as much of a technologist as I am, and as much of a tech evangelist as I am, and an AI person I am, I don't think how quickly this has all happened is a good thing, because we haven't had time to absorb anything
think
and
about
actually
it, like,
figure it out.
What does change do to humans? Change causes fear. What does fear cause in humans? Fear causes hate. And I'm thinking that's what we're seeing a lot with the dichotomy of civilization in America, is a lot of hate. I think it's because change is happening too quickly. That spreads fear. Fear spreads hate.
Love leads to anger.
Oh
leads
my
to hate.
God!
And
I'm not
hate
freaking Yoda.
leads to suffering.
Hate to suffering.
Anyhow, so of course in this 20-year period, we've had internet companies like Google and Facebook and Amazon, were birthed out of this internet revolution that we're still in, and this democratization of information to become three of the most powerful companies in the world alongside Apple and Microsoft. And I talked a lot about in the past about how powerful these companies are and how much influence they exert, and I won't dive into it again, but it's substantial. It's very reminiscent of the Gilded Age, when you had companies like Standard Oil that owned almost 90% of the entire oil market, and Andrew Carnegie's steel company and the railroad companies. I mean, it's very reminiscent of that right now, but it's different because it's all intangible stuff. Nothing really other than Apple and Microsoft that these companies produce. Well, I guess Google and Facebook don't really produce anything physical, minus some of their hardware. But, I mean, it's different because it's mostly intangible stuff. And
Yep. So how does Facebook make money then?
Oh, don't even get me started with that.
Ads, Senator.
So all of these companies, right, grew up in an age where there is a broad lack of tech literacy, where most people don't understand much about technology and still don't today. And government regulation is little to none.
Yeah.
And both of these are the main causes of the problems we're facing today. Lack of government regulation and lack of tech literacy. Because look at the duality of this. If more people actually understood tech and data, we'd have we'd have a population that could question what's going on more, which would lead to change.
There's so many instances where I've seen, I mean, not even an old person, like not even a boomer. Sometimes it's like they're actually my age.
Now, Brett,
like
we may have some older generational folks listening, so mind your generational stuff there.
Well, I'll tell, if there's any older generations listening, I'll tell you what I tell my mom. I'm not talking about you specifically.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the other older people. What was I going to say now? I forgot.
I don't remember, but I was saying that
we could progress further forward if people are more educated on the tech that we have currently.
Yes, and there really isn't any good tech literacy in the United States, and not even just the United States, in the world for that matter. Yeah, I mean, you and I are a testament to the fact that you can learn about this stuff if you want to. It's out there. You can learn about it, but you have to want to do it. And I think if we gave more people the opportunity to learn about it, we wouldn't be in such a predicament with the general public not understanding what data is being collected from them through implied consent. So, and on top of that, government has been completely hands-off with all this. They haven't tried to define data. They haven't tried to dive into data privacy and reel these companies in with their monetization models that use you and I as the product, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's both of these things that are causing the problems we're facing today. And of course, on top of that, as we just kind of dove into, these social media companies specifically, and even Google, develop monetization models where the user is the product being sold to an advertiser. Like,
oh yeah, that's all it is.
Everybody, there's so many people that still wonder why Facebook is free. Well, Facebook is free because they're selling you to an advertiser to make money.
Correct. They're selling your brain.
that old saying, there is no such thing as a free lunch, couldn't be more true.
Yeah, they're literally selling your information to advertisers so everybody can just make money off of
Correct.
us. We're like
And there's
we're like
a
freaking
lot of money.
We're like the batteries in the Matrix. They're the machines. Facebook's the machines taking the power off of a. Jeez, I can't freaking talk, Nick. I'm just so stressed about this idea in my head. That's what it's like. It's the Matrix. They're feeding off of us. They're feeding off of our brain power, like what we like and what we do, our personality on their ads to make money.
Good metaphor, Brett. That's a really good metaphor, actually.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even so much just the monetization model, but I guess it is the monetization model because their whole goal is to keep you on the platform as much as possible. So social media becomes incredibly addictive as the algorithms that power these platforms get smarter and smarter because the more people use them, the more information they're freely giving, the smarter the algorithms get.
Correct.
Just for perspective again, let's take a look at the active users currently on some of these social media platforms. Facebook, 2.7 billion people. Last time I checked, we have a population roughly of 7 billion on this planet.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of influence.
This also is not counting the fake accounts that are on there, but which is sizable to say the least. But that's still 2.7 billion people.
And you have to count the bridge that goes over to Instagram.
Right. Well, YouTube, 2 billion active users on YouTube.
That's insane.
And Twitter, 330 million, which nowhere, still a ways away from YouTube and Facebook, but that's still a lot of users.
I want to know how many of those 2 billion made a video and never posted again on YouTube.
Right. Well, even people just having accounts to watch videos.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
We look at Google, and Google owns 88.14% of the internet search engine market.
Well, yeah, I wonder how Bing's doing.
Everybody wonders why Google is starting to have the federal government breathe down their neck. Well, I mean, geez, almost 90% of the search engine market. That ain't a monopoly. I don't know what is.
That's totally a monopoly.
Absolutely.
I think there's just such a misunderstanding with the internet, with our government, that they don't realize it's a monopoly.
Right.
On search
Which
engine.
means the more market share that Google owns, the more they can control the information that you see.
Correct.
Yeah. And with that, social media is deliberately designed to be addictive. So that's why every time you go on these platforms, you're constantly served up with content that triggers an emotional response so you stay on the platform.
Yeah.
And with more than 60% of the world's population on the internet, I mean, really it was only a matter of time before the concept of trusted information began to deteriorate. I mean, let's be real,
Mm-hmm. When did you think that started? Because I remember before social media, my mom always told me, she's like, did you get that off the internet? Like the information I got? This was like back when I was like probably like 13, 14. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you can't trust anything on the internet. And all of a sudden, there was some kind of shift in the past like decade that
and everybody
and their damn mother believes everything on the internet.
Right.
I don't know what happened.
It's strange. It's absolutely bonkers. But of course, with the breakdown of trusted information, thus we are now in the state of conspiracy theory and siloed groups of people who all they do is talk amongst themselves and don't get any outside information, outside opinions, and keeps them in their bubbles, which creates the problems we're dealing with today.
It's actually like legit pushing me away from even reading stuff on the internet anymore. I'm starting to just get my information from trusted news, like media sources on TV now, which I never did before.
Well, it's just for me, it's gotten to the point where, when I really started getting active on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff a couple years ago, like I really enjoyed it, but something happened within like the last year or two where every time I go on one of these platforms, I just feel stressed out.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a constant race to cross compare yourself with somebody else to look like you're the best.
I'm sick of it. I'm kind of just want to be a hermit and live in the woods like a hobbit,
And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good to it. Like the only reason really I started speaking and we were able to grow Red Fox is because of social media. But at the same time,
for sure, there's pros and cons, man.
It's just there's so much fakeness to it all, and we've gotten to that point. Like the novelty of it, for me at least, has completely worn off.
The honeymoon phase is gone.
It's like, we gotta figure this out, or this is going to truly be the downfall of humanity.
And I think our generation, growing up with this since we were children, I think we're going to be the ones to put laws and regulations in and change these things in the future.
Well, I don't know about that, because you have the younger generation thinking that the only way for them to be successful is be a fake Instagram person.
That needs to change because that's not how you do it.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Instagram accounts of children
Yeah.
influencers.
Yeah.
Tell me how that's okay.
That's not okay. They don't have,
No,
they
it
don't have,
isn't.
they don't have consent, so
And
they,
these-
they should be 18.
And the parents of these children are dressing their kids up in clothes and positioning them to look like they're an influencer. How do you think that's impacting their behavioral development as they get older?
I guess you can say that with like child actors.
And a lot of child actors grow up and have issues.
Yeah, like look at all the child actors on Disney Channel. You know, like
Well, not
it's
all
probably
of
it's
them.
probably the same. It's probably the same mental thing going on. You know,
That's
with
what I'm
these child
saying. Like,
influencers.
that's the culture we're creating, because it's this constant comparison of, my life has to be better than yours, and I'm willing to act completely fake in order to do it.
Yeah, once you break free of that, I've learned that over the years. Like once you like free your mind of not caring about what you look like to others and how you look, like how you compare yourself to them, that's when you're truly free mentally.
I think we're gonna. I really do think in the next couple of years we're gonna have the rubber band's gonna snap back, and there's gonna be an exodus from social media. I could be completely wrong, but you can only stretch a rubber band like this so far before it either snaps
Just
back
snaps,
or breaks.
Yeah,
I'd rather it snap
to
back than
reality.
break in half, because if it breaks in half, then that's not good. So, a pandemic of misinformation. That's where we're at, everybody. And I think this pandemic is far worse than the COVID-19 pandemic has been for many years. And this
it'll
will
last way
continue,
longer too.
and it'll last far, far longer.
Yep.
So it truly is evident that we're living in a period where there is more misinformation being shared than credible information from trusted sources.
Yeah,
I think we can agree on this, can't we, Brett?
I can agree with you on that. Yes.
I would say we're at that point where more misinformation is being shared.
Well,
and-
actually, no, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Probably because misinformation looks more appealing to people, and that's why it spread faster.
Well, maybe let me point it to context. Depending on where you're spending your time, there could be more misinformation. Like if you're spending most of your time on Facebook, definitely more misinformation. If you're spending your time on Twitter, probably more misinformation, depending on who you're following.
And what do you mean? What do you mean by spread? Like shares, or people just mouth to mouth, or what?
What do you
Or
mean
just-
what do you mean spread?
Did you say spread, or what did you say before? There's
No,
more-
I said maybe it comes down to context where you spend your time. There could be more misinformation than credible information.
I would say, yeah, you're right. There's more misinformation.
But
probably.
I mean, you even look at the mainstream media, and it's turning into misinformation as well.
you have to think about it too, because why is misinformation easier spread? It's because you can just make it up in your head and spread it around. Where real news has to happen.
And it generates money.
It generates clicks. Yeah, people click on it more because it's more appealing, and it's like, whoa.
So,
let's
well,
spread
that
this around.
to the next point I was about to make, the problem of misinformation has only been perpetuated by both the media and the internet as competition grows for the attention of the public, where of course a lot of money is made from the more users or viewers you have, which is why things have become more outrageous and why trusted information has deteriorated so much. And people have talked about this all the time. Reading actual facts is boring.
It really is.
Like, reading things that are real is boring. People
Yeah.
like reading things that, again, elicit an emotional response and seem completely crazy that your attention is captivated by.
Yeah.
News, boring old news, that doesn't do that.
Yeah, and why do you think the news spreads around negative information, like negative news stories? Because people are more prone to share that.
But see, that's the thing. It didn't always used to be like that. You look at the...
Because I think they started noticing that they're probably failing, Nick.
You look at the news reports and the newscasters of the 60s and 70s, and it really wasn't like that. It wasn't really until the 1980s and the cable news networks and all that stuff that it started breaking down into sensationalist news
Well, you
versus fact.
You do one negative news story and you see it got twice as many views. You're going to start continuing to do that trend.
That's dangerous. I've always said that as dangerous.
Yeah.
But the internet and social media, I think, can be considered as two of the main causes for this era of post-truth that we're in, as anyone can make claims or share information without that information being verified or checked for accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen that more than ever since the pandemic started, with people making posts about 5G causing COVID-19 and people going and trying to destroy cell phone towers, and people thinking that by drinking cleanser they could somehow rid themselves or protect themselves from the disease.
Okay, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist, but I can. If you told me that 5G will affect the bees in certain ways and affect their patterns and how they pollinate, sure, I can buy that. But when you're telling me that they faked the pandemic to keep us inside so they could put 5G towers up to control our minds, yeah, you're kind of going to lose me on that, okay, buddy?
But that's what I'm saying, is it's this post-truth era where anyone can make a claim or share information and it doesn't have to be verified or checked for accuracy.
Correct, yeah.
Whereas at least with the media and radio and television and newspaper, it had to go through somewhat of a vetting process before it got shared.
Yeah.
Especially if it was a news source that was not partisan, was not biased. Something like NPR, or well, maybe not NPR is a good example, but like the Associated Press and Reuters, they're just there to report information. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets dangerous, is I could make an outlandish claim on Facebook and fight until the death that I think it's true.
Yeah.
But if it can't be verified or checked for accuracy,
then
other people probably would believe me.
Yeah. And even people do fact check people these days, and they say, "Oh, where'd you get that? CNN?"
Right, but that's a whole political thing that we won't get into, of course.
Okay.
Now, along with that lack of verification or checking for accuracy of what's shared on social media platforms, these companies have fostered the development of echo chambers, of course, where misinformation can be spread with ease, and it's incredibly hard to remove people from these silos once they've been sucked in, as we've seen the last few years. And when they're in these silos and these echo chambers, when they're not getting any countering information, you can't question your beliefs, you can't consider different ideas, because you're constantly absorbing the same information over and over and over again. There's nothing coming in that's like, hey, have you thought about this? Or did you think about this? Or
they've gone so far down the rabbit hole, the rabbits are going to start going on human holes.
Right, but I also think that, in a way, could negatively impact our overall intelligence as a species, because when you critically think, you're using intelligence to rationalize different concepts and ideas. When you're not doing that, I mean, that's not going to lead to good things.
Oh, this new, like you're talking about. Oh no, we're eventually going to be going into QAnon here. Like, this form of thinking is detrimental to the human race.
Well, and that's the problem with social media, right? Because due to how social media platform algorithms work, they consistently promote this misinformation to keep people and users addicted and using the platform. So even though they're saying, well, we're trying to fight misinformation, there's no benefit to them doing it, because that's what keeps people engaged with, which makes them money.
Correct. The people making the news for QAnon people, they don't believe it.
The fact that world events have been altered due to the intentional spread of misinformation I'm still having a difficult time wrapping my head around that.
For the first time in like 200 years, the Confederate flag was flown in our capital because somebody on 4chan thought it'd be funny to screw around with older generation.
And it's also a generational issue too, right? Like, if you look statistically, adults older than 65 are actually 7 times more likely to share misinformation than adults age 18 to 29.
Which baffles me. I don't get it. I don't get it, why they believe some of this stuff. I look at some articles and I go, that's complete bullshit.
I'm excited for psychological studies to be done there, and I'm sure they're happening as we speak.
Oh, I'm following some people on TikTok where they've broken out of QAnon, and now they're confessing like what's been going on and what they were thinking, like what was going on in their head. Like, they completely thought that we were the demons of the world, like you and I, and normal people.
That's part of that echo chamber problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a generational issue too, because for some reason, older people who are using these tools believe everything they see.
Yeah.
And don't question it, which, again, there's got to be some psychology studies going on, and I hope there are. But this also leads us into what I may have mentioned this in us talking here, this era of post-truth. And it's safe to say that we are now living in an official post-truth era. I will scream that from the rooftops here. And it really is caused primarily by the internet and these big tech companies who their whole goal is to monetize people.
Yeah, we're like
make money.
We're like flocks of sheep, and they just shave our wool off every few months.
Because you can't entirely blame the internet, because the internet was here before the social media platforms were. But at the same time, the tools and the big tech companies, their primary monetization model is to keep people addicted to these platforms that continuously spread misinformation.
Yeah, that's all they care about. They I bet you they believe they probably don't believe any of the stuff they make up. These new news corporations like QAnon and Newsmax,
I don't
OAN.
think so.
They don't believe any of it. They just want to get money from people.
It's all where the money flows. That's how it's always been. And when I say this concept of post-truth, so when you think of post-truth, think of it as more of like a philosophical or political concept for the disappearance of shared objectives and standards for truth are deteriorating.
Yeah.
Because the standards that we once held for fact and true information, I'm not going to say no longer exist, because they do, but they are rapidly deteriorating from what they once were.
Yes.
So, we're living in interesting times. That's all I can say. We need to tackle this problem, or it's going to truly be the downfall of us.
I don't know about you, Nick, but I'm just at the point where it's like, I just hope I live to be 80 and I can just not die before then.
But that's the thing, Brett. Like, you don't really care about social media anyhow. You spend a lot of time on it.
No, not really.
You spend a lot of time on TikTok.
You're counting that as social media?
That is social media. And if you don't think that they have the same intentions as any other social media platform, you are 100% wrong.
Okay, then I spend a lot of time on social media. It's just TikTok. I don't go on Facebook. I don't go on Twitter.
It's just TikTok.
Hey,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I don't care. Hey, let me finish talking. I don't go on Facebook. I don't go on Instagram. I don't go on Twitter. I don't go on LinkedIn. I don't go on any of those. If I do, it's like 5 minutes a day. The rest of the day is TikTok, because I find videos funny. Haha, that dog farted.
Right, but my point still stands that it's an addictive algorithm that is keeping you on the platform, so your data can be used to sell you ads.
Yeah, and if they keep me laughing, then keep taking my data.
That totally contradicts everything we've just been talking about. You are a piece of work.
I know it does. I'm a hypocritical piece of shit.
Well, let's start winding things down here by closing on what's the deal with free speech. Because now that we've pretty much torn open the sack here of misinformation, what's the deal with free speech? Because this also is this goes exactly with what we've talking about, but is a huge point of contention for a lot of people for some reason. And if you're listening internationally, for context, if you do not know, the United States, because that's what I'm going to be referencing in this part here, the United States has an amendment to our Constitution protecting free speech, which I will read verbatim, just so we're all clear. The First Amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The first word there is the most important to understand. Congress.
Yeah, freedom of speech from the government, not from Twitter.
Congress, federal government, state government, local government.
Yep.
Congress cannot infringe on your free speech, your exercise, your freedom to exercise the practice of your religion, to assemble peaceably, or to petition the government for redress of grievances. Congress. I will say it again. Congress.
Government.
I
think people read that whole paragraph and they see freedom of speech. Okay.
Right.
That means I have freedom of speech everywhere.
Now, I will say this. The First Amendment did not predict the rise of the internet or social media, where the new town square would be a gathering place of billions of people in a digital reality versus an actual physical town square of a few hundred or a few thousand people. So, and that brings up the whole argument about how I feel these documents need to be updated, but that's not what we're talking about here. And because of how big these tech companies and social media platforms have gotten, with no regulation, with a monetization model that preys off of users as the product, whether they want to believe it or not, they have inherently become arbiters of truth because they run the largest platforms where people congregate and talk about ideas on a daily basis. And to be honest, they have brought this upon themselves. 110% brought this upon themselves because of this lack of government oversight and regulation, coupled with lack of tech literacy and a desire to make money. So whatever you hear, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, the people at LinkedIn, anybody say, we don't want to be the arbiters of truth, it is a load of BS. Because they know they are. They know that they've walked into this corner that they can't walk out of. How can you not be an arbiter of truth when the largest sources of information for people are on your platforms? And they have done this to themselves.
Imagine making like a social media platform to get chicks in college, and then 20 years later, you're known as the lizard man and the arbiter of truth in the world.
But at the same time, and this is very dangerous, though, that private companies have this capability, right? This is why I believe in regulation, at least in this context. And they're just operating in an incredibly gray area because they're so big that people have, to the whole point we just made about the First Amendment being solely for Congress and the government.
Yeah.
They're so big, people have blurred the lines between how that amendment applies.
Yeah.
Because in writing, it only applies to government.
I think you're getting. I think you're going. You're starting to. I'm losing you here. You're circling, man. You're circling. Here.
I know, but I'm just this pisses me off because people don't understand free speech, but at the same time, these companies have grown so big that they have to somewhat adhere to that because of how big they are.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
But like I said, it's an incredibly gray area because I firmly believe on these platforms there shouldn't be any violence. There shouldn't be any hate speech. We shouldn't have it, right? I mean, I firmly believe that and always will be. If it incites violence against any other human being, take it off. It shouldn't be there.
Private corporations have the right to make their own freedom of speech rules.
Correct. They do. Through their terms and conditions.
That's why you can't walk through naked through the grocery store for the past 100 years.
Right. So, however, then you look at the censorship part of it. And you look at what happened with Parler, what happened with Donald Trump, and the alt-right. Again, I'm all for banning violence and hate speech, which these three entities did very much of. However, when you start setting a precedent of censorship, because I think we all know that a majority of the information that these social media platforms prefer to share aligns more in liberal progressive views. I'm just going to say that. I think we all know that's true.
There's a difference here, Nick. So I understand. Obviously, they should be shut down for spreading misinformation, but now you've kind of screwed yourself. You should have done it right off the bat.
Right.
When you see misinformation, you do it right off the bat. Because now what has happened, all these people believe all this bullshit, and you have a large minority part of the population that believe all this crap. And now you start censoring it. Now you're radicalizing this part of the population. That's bad.
Okay, Brett, that's an excellent point you just made. I'll backtrack what I said, because that's what I was trying to say in a really bad way.
Yes.
If you're going to censor, you have to do it and set that precedent very early on, because when you let it spiral out of control, then it does step into this gray area of free speech and trying to completely shut a viewpoint down, which again, I don't agree at all with what these people say or think. I don't. And I think that any violence or hate speech should be removed in general. However, there is something to be said about everybody having an opinion and believing what they want. But if you're going to censor, essentially, since you technically are that arbiter of truth that you walked yourself into, you do it from the get-go. And they didn't do that. Because you know why? Because it sold. It made money.
Yep. And now you have a wildfire, and you're trying to use a spritz bottle on a wildfire.
Right. And society is once again having to confront what truly is free speech and what should be condemned, which is something we shouldn't have to be confronting.
Correct.
So, the last question I ask, I'll pose this to everybody. Can we shut the lid on Pandora's box? And I'm not going to answer that because I don't know. I really don't know.
Come on, solar flares. Come on, solar flares.
Oh,
that'll shut it up.
That's your answer?
That'll shut the box down. Just completely destroy our electrical power grid. Yeah, sure.
Or people start taking responsibility.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll vote
Crazy
for
thought.
Solar flares.
Crazy thought, right? But truly, I think in order for us to get through this, people are going to have to start taking responsibility. Governments are going to have to act, and people are going to need to start questioning the crap that these companies are doing. It's a dual approach, but in order for people to start questioning, people need to understand technology more, need to have a greater degree of tech literacy. So, it's a big problem we've created for ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, it may sound like I'm putting a lot of the blame solely on these companies. I'm not. I'm a very strong believer in personal responsibility. Social media is a tool. Technology is a tool. We choose how to use the tool. But at the same time, you have the tool basically saying, well, we're going to take all your data and we're going to sell it to these people for trillions of dollars and keep you on the platform and sell you stuff you don't need. So that's why it's a problem on both ends.
Yep. So, want to start winding it down here? Do we get through it all?
We did.
Yeah, we did. Cool.
That was a good one. I like that.
Yeah, I like that. That was a good, fun topic that I think needs to be talked about more. It needs to be talked about more from better platforms, not better, but like higher up platforms that are more popular. Even the government should probably be talking about this more often. What's going on right now? Because we need more people talking about it to shut the Pandora's box.
Well, and again, and I just want everybody to know, like, our goal isn't to do episodes like this all the time, but I figured since it is very front and center in the public eye right now, we need to draw awareness to it. And since, honestly, social media is technology, it falls exactly within the purview of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's our little loophole we used to talk about it. So,
anyhow,
hey, it's tech.
Thank you all for joining us this week. As always, hopefully you've found some nuggets in this episode that really stand out to you that you enjoy. And if you are interested in being a guest on the show or know of someone who may be, send us a DM on Twitter. As I just go through all this stuff on social media, send us a DM on Twitter or an email.
Send us a letter via carrier pigeon. Thank you.
There we go. Send us a DM on Twitter or an email to theartificialpodcast at redfox-ai.com. And make sure to smash that subscribe button on YouTube, as well as subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Also, if you like what Brett and I do, please leave us a review. They go a long way in helping give some increased visibility to the show, and we like reading what you have to say.
And I guess we'll allow the freedom of speech of 1 stars. So,
you're a funny monkey, Brett. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
All right.
Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and join our Artificial Podcasters Facebook group. I love this, how I'm just throwing social media into the ground, and I'm like, follow us on all of our stuff.
Yeah, like you dig up the grave and throw up the skeleton. Here, follow it right here.
Anyhow, though, as always, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
See you later.
Artificial
Intelligent voice recognition.
machine learning.
Robot.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.